3%, and I hate to see an additional $5 million taken out of it. So while I have sympathy for what the gentlemen are trying to do, and I know that they are great advocates for organic farmers, I oppose the amendment at this time, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What person? Gentleman from Jersey rise.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. Our colleagues may recall that Mr. DeFazio and I and others offered essentially this amendment in fiscal year 2007, and it passed, demonstrating the strong bipartisan support in this House for an increase in funding in this program. The $5 million funding level, however, although it was preserved until now, has been completely eliminated by this continuing resolution. In other words, both sides of this aisle have felt that this is worthwhile spending. Despite the worst economic downturn we've experienced since the Depression, the market for organic consumer products grew more than 5% in the past year, several times the growth of conventional food sales. And growth in organic non-food items was even more pronounced, increasing more than 9% as compared to 1% in conventional non-food items. Now, my friend who just spoke in opposition to the legislation, Mr. Kingston, said, well, it's a booming industry. Why do we need to do this? Well, transition from non-organic farming to organic farming is a big step, especially for a small farm. And although there are more than 13,000 certified organic producers in the United States, that's not enough. We still need to help farmers make the transition to organic farming. And this program does more than help them make the transition. It helps build an understanding of best practice. Organic Transition Program is a highly competitive grants program. It's been extremely important to the organic farming community. It funds research to assist the farmers in overcoming the barriers to make the transition and, as I say, to understand organic farming. Through grants awarded under this program, for example, projects were funded at Ohio State to study the impact of organic animal production on water quality, or grafting to improve organic vegetable production. The small farmers don't have the opportunity to do this research as they are facing the big step of whether to make the transition to organic farming. At the University of Minnesota, this competitive grants program facilitated organic poultry production and helped achieve soybean aphid suppression using a full-seeded rye cover crop. In other words, the organic industry really benefits from this. And, you know, we should be talking about job creation. The bill before us today, as it appears, will cost hundreds of thousands of jobs. Cost hundreds of thousands of jobs. It will end hundreds of thousands of jobs. We should focus our resources on industries that are growing and providing jobs. This quite small restoration of funds, $5 million, would do a great deal for the quality of life of farmers, but also for jobs in America. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment to restore $5 million to the Organic Transitions Program. And I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose the gentleman from California rise?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't going to speak on this, but let me tell you why I changed my mind. First of all, I represent the largest number of organic growers in the United States and the headquarters of Earthbound Farms, which is the largest shipper of organic produce in the United States. And what concerns me is that you totally wiped out the program, zeroed it out. And it is organic transition grants. One, they're competitive because they're grants. Two, it's about people transitioning from traditional agriculture, which is agriculture that uses pesticides, herbicides, and so on into an organic, you have to lay your land fallow. It means you can't for 3 years use any of those fumigants on your land. And that's all this money goes to, is to help you transition. And it's, you know, this is not major agriculture that needs these transition grants. It's a really small farmer who finds, as was stated previously, an organic niche that they want to sell to, and they need some assistance both in research and how do you get certified? Because after you, in order to be organic, you have to go out there and have people test everything and be certified as organic before you're allowed to use the organic label on your marketing. So it's a small amount of money, but to zero it out, I think, is just going too far. I support the amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs upon the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those in favor say no. All opposed say no, excuse me. All opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
On that, ask for
Gentleman from Oregon, from Georgia.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman has asked for a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of the Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon will be postponed. Clerk, resume reading.
11. Section 1224, the level for agricultural programs, animal and plant health inspection service, salaries and expenses shall be $829,953,000. Section 1225, the level for agricultural programs, agricultural marketing services shall be $81,711,000. Section 1226, the level for agricultural programs, agricultural marketing service, limitation on administrative expenses shall be $60,947,000. Section 1227, the amounts included under the heading Agricultural Programs, Agricultural Marketing Services, Funds for Strengthening Markets, Income, and Supply in Public Law 111-80 shall be applied to funds appropriated by substituting $0 for $10 million. Section 1228, the level for agricultural programs, grain inspection, packers, and stockyards administration salaries and expenses shall be $40,342,000. Section 1229, the level for agricultural programs, grain inspection, packers, and stockyards administrations, limitation on inspection and weighing services expenses, $45,041,000. Section 1230, the level for agricultural programs, food safety, and inspection service shall be $930,120,000.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk, number 93, which would restore funding for the Washington Metropolitan Area
Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 93, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
What purpose the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Point of order is recognized. Gentleman from Virginia will speak on his amendment.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Gentleman from Virginia will speak on his amendment. 5 minutes.
I thank the Speaker, or the Chairman, and I offer this amendment on behalf of myself, Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Moran, Ms. Edwards, Mr. Van Hollen. In his final term in Congress, my Republican predecessor, Tom Davis, helped broker an agreement to boost Metro funding by the federal, state, and local governments. Under this agreement, the federal government invested $150 million annually to be matched by Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. This investment is essential for our region. It has provided WMATA with funding to begin fixing the safety problems identified by the National Transportation Safety Board, which will cost over $1 billion cumulatively. It also is essential for the federal government to function efficiently, even as the federal government fails to pay its fair share compared to local and state funding for Metro. Finally, unlike any other transit system in America, our Metro system serves 12 million tourists annually who come to visit their nation's capital. The federal government relies on a functional Metro system. Mr. Chairman, over half of all Metro stations serve federal offices, and 40% of the entire federal workforce uses Metro to get to work every day. As Congress itself noted when passing the National Capital Region Transportation Act in 1960, an improved transportation system of the National Capital Region is essential to the continued and effective performance of the functions of the government of the United States. From September 11th to the blizzards from last year, we've learned through hard experience that Metro is essential to move people both through severe weather and emergencies in our region. President Obama included the $150 million that my Republican predecessor's authorization bill called for in his budget, but the Republican leadership removed it in this continuing resolution. Perhaps my newer colleagues have not yet had a chance to visit Northern Virginia, where Metro Rail extension to Dulles Airport is spurring billions of dollars in private investment while providing thousands of jobs for the construction workers building the rail line. If my colleagues had visited this project, they might hesitate to eliminate investments like this, which will be repaid many times over by subsequent private investment. In recognition of the importance of this Metro funding, I introduced an amendment on behalf of my colleagues and myself to restore $150 million in federal funding, which would be matched by state governments. To offset this expense and reduce the deficit, I proposed offsetting the expense by cutting direct payments to large agribusiness. As we debate this bill, there are people at work building rail to Dulles, and if the Republican majority succeed in passing appropriations bills such as this, those transportation projects, jobs, and real estate investments will be a thing of the past. One step we can take to reduce the damage done by this CR is to restore this critical Metro funding. And Mr. Chairman, I reserve my time.
Gentleman cannot reserve. Gentleman yield.
I do.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment, and I will speak on it a little bit.
Gentleman speaking on the point of order.
That's right. Yes, I'm speaking on the point of order.
All right. Point of order.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposes to amend portions of the bill not yet read. The amendment may not be considered en bloc under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because the amendment proposes to transfer funds between the subcommittees. And here's what's going on. You're mixing your operating and your capital funds on this particular account, and this committee does not have jurisdiction over those accounts. And I want to point out that the subcommittees work very hard to balance all these very difficult cuts, and we're trying to work within our 302B allocations. We're in a situation right now, for every dollar that we spend as a U.S. government, 40 cents is borrowed. A lot of that money is borrowed. I'm speaking to the point of order and
wish to be heard on the point of order. Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I deeply regret that my colleague would invoke a point of order. As I said, the Metro funding, in this case, he talks about difficult decisions. This zeroes out the entire federal amount of subsidy for capital construction and safety improvements from a system that is over 30 years old, reaching capacity, and serves first and foremost the federal workforce.
To the point of order.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman confine his remarks to the point of order.
I can't hear. Oh, I thought I was speaking to the point of order and the points made by our colleague.
Your remarks need to be in reference to the point of order, not your amendment.
As I said, Mr. Chairman, I deeply regret the fact that my colleague would cite a point of order on a bill of such importance to the National Capital Region.
Does anyone else wish to be heard? To be considered in an en bloc pursuant to Clause 2F of Rule 21 and Section 2 of House Resolution 92, an amendment must propose only to transfer appropriations among objects in the bill and may not address objects within more than one suballocation made by the Committee on Appropriations under Section 302B of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. Because the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia proposes to transfer appropriations among objects falling within more than one such suballocation, it may not avail itself of Clause 2F of Rule 21 to address portions of the bill not yet read. The amendment is not in order. Clerk will resume reading the bill.
Page 174, line 18, Section 1231. The level for agricultural programs, Farm Service Agency, salaries and expenses shall be $1,063,558,000. Section 1232, the level for agricultural programs, Farm Service Agency, grassroots source water protection program shall be $4,630,000. Section 1233, under the heading Agricultural Programs, Farm Service Agency, Agricultural Credit Insurance Fund Program Account, and Public Law 111-80 shall be applied to funds appropriated by this division. Section 1234, the level for agricultural programs risk management agency shall be $77,177,000. Section 1235, the level for conservation programs, natural resources conservation service, conservation operations shall be $836 million. Section 1236, the level for conservation programs, natural resources conservation service, watershed and flood prevention operations shall be $0. Section 1237, the level for conservation programs, natural resources conservation service, watershed rehabilitation program shall be $20 million. Section 1238, the level for conservation programs, natural resources conservation service, resource conservation and development shall be $0. Section 1239, the level for rural development programs, rural development salaries and expenses shall be $181,987,000. Section 1240, amounts under the heading Rural Development Programs, Rural Housing Service, Rural Housing Insurance Fund Program Account, and Public Law 111-80 shall be applied to funds appropriated by this division by substituting $34,004,000 for $34,412,000 and $5,052,000 for $5,045,000. Section 1241, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural housing insurance fund program account for the cost of direct and guaranteed loans shall be $70,200,000. Section 1242, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural housing insurance fund program account for the cost of housing repair loans shall be $6,437,000. Section 1243, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural housing insurance fund program account for the cost of repair, rehabilitation, and new construction of rental housing shall be $23,446,000. Section 1244, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural housing insurance fund program account for the cost of multifamily housing guaranteed loans shall be $12,513,000. Section 1245, there is appropriated to the Secretary of Agriculture $288,000 for the Section 523 Self-Help Housing Land Development Loans. Section 1246, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural housing insurance fund program account for administrative expenses shall be $454,383,000. Section 1247, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rental assistance program shall be $955,635,000. Section 1248, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, multifamily housing revitalization program account shall be $16,400,000. Section 1249, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, mutual and self-help housing grants shall be $37 million. Section 1250, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural housing assistance grants shall be $40,400,000. Section 1251, the level for rural development programs, rural housing service, rural community facilities program account shall be $32,450,000. Section 1252, the level for rural development programs, rural business cooperative service, rural business program account shall be $84,505,000. Section 1253, the level for rural development programs, rural business cooperative service, rural development loan fund program account for the principal amount of direct loans shall be $21,936,000. Section 1254, in connection with the rural development programs, rural business cooperative service, rural...
Gentleman from...
I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of the bill through page 196, line 18, be considered as read, printed in the record, and open to amendment at any point.
Is there objection? So ordered. Are there amendments to this portion of the bill?
Mr. Speaker.
You're speaking.
Mr. Chairman,
First gentleman from Louisiana, rise.
I rise to offer an amendment to restore funding to the Economic Development Administration.
Gentleman has an amendment. Clerk will read. Gentleman specified the amendment by number.
153.
Clerk will read the amendment. Excuse me, the reading has not progressed to that portion of the bill. No, not yet.
That was what we just Isn't that what we did a unanimous consent on Bill 196?
Yeah, through line 8.
18.
Line 18?
Yeah, it was through line.
Line 18.
It was through line 18.
Line 18.
Chair's mistaken. Gentleman's amendment is in order. Clerk will designate the amendment.
Thank you.
Amendment number 153, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Michaud of Maine.
The gentleman from Maine is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today to offer this amendment to restore funding to the Economic Development Administration. The investment made by EDA in all of our districts lead to economic development and job creations. By these investments are not just some government handouts. By law, EDA projects require a 50% local cost share and must leverage significant private sector investment. EDA's investments are also competitive and based on a regional comprehensive economic development strategy that are spearheaded by local officials, private sector leaders, and community representatives. The agency utilizes this approach to reflect the local and regional priorities of our communities. But most importantly, all EDA project investments must result in creation and retention of high-quality jobs. Let me repeat, EDA is the one agency of the federal government that has a singular focus of creating jobs. And it has a strong track record of success in my home state of Maine and throughout the country. In fact, from 2004 to 2008, EDA-funded projects directly led to the creation of approximately 200,000 jobs. Look, all of us support cuts to spending to get our fiscal house in order. We all are realistic. We know that actions of one program or agencies won't be enough to solve the nation's jobs problem. But at a time when our states, local community, and business continues to struggle, it's the wrong time to be cutting a program that's a proven job creator. It's the wrong time to turn our backs on investments in our communities that will make a real difference. But it is the right time to set our priorities and insist on our investments as focus to job creation. I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment. The fiscal year 10 level was $293 million. The CR cuts it to $175. This amendment will actually bring it up to $255. So I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of the time. Gentleman from Kentucky. Questions on the amendment? From the gentleman from Maine. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
Chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
On that, Mr. Chair, I request the yeas and nays.
Recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Maine will be postponed. Are there other amendments to this portion of the bill? Resume reading of the bill.
Page 196, line 19, Section 1303. The level for Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency Minority Business Development shall be $30,400,000. Section 1304, the level for Department of Commerce National Telecommunications and Information Administration salaries and expenses shall be $40,649,000. Section 1305, the level for Department of Commerce National Institute of Standards and Technology Scientific and Technical Research and Services shall be $469,500,000. Section 1306, the level for Department of Commerce National Institute of Standards and Technology Industrial Technology Services shall be $169,600,000. Section 1307, the level for Department of Commerce National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Pacific Coastal Recovery shall be $50 million. Section 1308, the level for Department of Justice General Administration National Drug Intelligence Center shall be $34,023,000.
What purpose, the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer an amendment pre-printed in the Congressional Record and designated as Amendment Number 368.
Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment number 368, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Flake of Arizona.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the Speaker. This amendment is straightforward. It would simply reduce more than $34 million in funding for the National Drug Intelligence Center and transfer that money into the spending reduction account. In short, the amendment would zero out funding for the National Drug Intelligence Center, which has survived for the past 3 years by way of a very broken earmarking process. For many institutions, drugs are handled on with a zero-tolerance policy. I would submit that taxpayers should send a clear signal here that we have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of wasteful spending. There's been no better example of wasteful spending than the NDIC, entity I've come to the floor many times with in the past to criticize and to limit funding for, not just me but many other members. A pet project that once belonged to a powerful member of Congress, the NDIC, was established in 1992 and has been the recipient of hundreds of millions of dollars since then. In 2005, the White House OMB reported that the NDIC, quote, has proven ineffective in achieving its assigned mission. In 2006, a spokesman for the DOJ asserted that the resources of the NDIC should be, quote, realigned to support priority counterterrorism and national security initiatives. And yet, here we are, 5 years later, funding the NDIC in spite of what will be 3 years of trillion-dollar deficits and a skyrocketing national debt. According to a CQ article from today, even the current administration's Deputy Attorney General James Cole said that many of the center's functions could be performed better elsewhere. The President's budget request released yesterday, and according to CQ, the NDIC was slated, or is slated, to receive a cut from its current level of funding, $44 million, down to $25 million. I submit that that is $25 million too much. According to the fiscal year 2011 budget summary for the National Drug Control Strategy, we spent more than $15 billion on anti-drug and drug control efforts in fiscal year 2010. Even if you believe the NDIC is effective and that it pulls its own weight, the anti-drug effort, like the budget of the Department of Defense, should not be immune from common-sense cuts that increase efficiency. And I can think of few things more efficient than closing down the NDIC once and for all. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Let me just note, the Wall Street Journal said at one point, conservatives have argued that the center is a waste of taxpayer money, and critics argue that it has never fulfilled its promise to provide high-quality analysis of drug networks. Again, an internal White House budget proposal aims to save nearly $17 million by downsizing NDIC. This is clearly, I think everybody admits, there's no reason for this facility to exist anymore and to keep sucking millions and millions of dollars every year from the taxpayer. The White House, successive White Houses, Republican and Democrat alike, have said this is inefficient, it's not filling its mission, so it's up to Congress now, when we're running a $1.5 trillion deficit that stacks up against a $14 trillion debt, to look at programs like this and say, all right, enough is enough. It's time that we close them down. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I say let's adopt this amendment. If we can't do this, where can we save money? If we can't close down a center that's received hundreds of millions of dollars that the White House, successive administrations, Republican and Democrat, have said it is duplicative, it's not fulfilling its mission. If we can't close these kind of things down, when are we going to save money? With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington.
I strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I appreciate the gentleman's usual zeal for finding savings in the budget, but I believe his amendment goes too far to achieve savings without considering the impacts. NDIC plays an important role in analyzing and disseminating information to law enforcement and the intelligence community about the production, trafficking, and consumption of illegal drugs. It produces the annual drug threat assessment, as well as local and regional assessments. DOJ is proposing a reduced funding level for NDIC in 2012, along with the realignment of some of its functions to the Drug Enforcement Administration. We will have to look closely at that proposal to ensure it would not set us back in dealing with the drug threat. But in any case, one simply cannot eliminate an agency overnight. NDIC performs significant functions that are critical to our law enforcement efforts, and those functions can't be simply shut down and transferred without significant planning. And NDIC has been operating under the current CR for several months and has obligated a significant amount of funding already. So there is no way to cut its funding for the year to zero. In fact, CBO scores amendment as saving only $16 million in budget authority, not $34. I urge my colleagues to defeat this flake amendment.
Back.
I yield back my time.
Thank you. Questions on the amendment for the gentleman from Arizona? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
Been the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman asks for a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona will be postponed. Clerk will resume reading.
Page 197, line 18, Section 1309, the level for Department of Justice, General Administration, Justice Information Sharing Technology shall be $78,285,000. Section 1310, the level for Department of Justice, General Administration, Tactical Law Enforcement Wireless Communications shall be $136,143,000. Section 1311, the Department of Justice, General Administration, Detention $663,000. Section 1312, the level for Department of Justice, legal activities, salaries, and expenses. General legal activities shall be $865,997,000. Section 1313, the level for Department of Justice, United States Marshal Service, construction shall be $16,929,000. Section 1314, the level for Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, construction shall be $106,960,000.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Will the gentleman specify which amendment?
Amendment number
235.
Amendment 235.
The chair will note that the reading has progressed past that point in the bill. Is the gentleman seeking unanimous consent to consider his amendment?
I would seek unanimous consent.
Is there
to
objection?
The amendment.
Is there objection? The gentleman is recognized in his reservation.
As I understand it, the gentleman wants to go back to a section which we've already covered.
The gentleman is correct.
Mr. Chairman, in order to move things along,
would the gentleman yield?
Have to have rules. And,
would the gentleman yield?
I have to object.
Would the gentleman?
Objection is heard. The clerk will continue to read.
Section 1315, the level for Department of Justice Federal Pension System salaries and expenses shall be $6,325,231,000. Section 1316, the level for Office of Science and Technology policy shall be $6,500,000. Section 1317, the level for National Service Foundation research and related activities shall be $5,467,920,000. Section 1318, the level for National Service Foundation major research equipment and facilities construction shall be $54,790,000. Section 1319, the level for National Science Foundation education and human resources shall be $725,760,000. Section 1320, the level for Department of Commerce Bureau of Census periodic census and programs shall be $913,707,000. Section 1321, the level for each of the following accounts shall be $0. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, Public Telecommunications Facilities, Planning and Construction, Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, Construction, and Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Weed and Seed Program Fund. Section 1322, the following set-asides included in Division B of Public Law 111-117 for projects specified in the explanatory statement accompanying this Act shall not apply to funds appropriated by this division. Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration, Operations and Administration, $5,215,000. Section 1323, the Departments of Commerce and Justice and National Aeronautics and Space Administration and the National Science Foundation are directed to submit spending plans to the House and Senate committees on appropriations within 60 days of enactment of this division. Section 1324, the set-aside included under the heading Department of Commerce, United States Patent and Trademark Office, salaries and expenses shall not apply to funds appropriated by this division. Section 1325, $44,900,000 shall be for the Technology Innovation Program. Section 1326.
Gentleman from Ohio.
I rise to offer an amendment 260 that has been printed in the congressional record.
The gentleman will allow the clerk to complete the reading of this section, then he can make his amendment.
Thank you.
Section 1326, the level for Department of Commerce National Institute of Standards and Technology construction of research facilities shall be $58 million.
What purpose does the gentleman rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer amendment 260.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 260, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Latta of Ohio.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes in favor of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to offer amendment 260 to reduce spending for the Department of Commerce under the National Institute of Standards and Technology construction of research facilities account by $10 million and transfer those funds to the spending reduction account. This program provides government money for construction of research science buildings. Currently, H.R. 1 funds the technology construction of research facilities account at $58 million, and this amendment will reduce it to $48 million. While scientific research is important, when our nation is experiencing massive deficits, we have to make these difficult cuts. We have a forecasted deficit of $1.6 trillion this year, and the national debt scheduled to triple in 10 years. I am simply proposing cutting spending from a program that received over $123 million in increased funding in the stimulus. The President released his budget proposal this week, which reflects a pattern of record spending and even higher taxes. This continued spending is funds that the U.S. government does not have as we continue to borrow from other countries. During the last session alone, the President signed into law over $1.8 trillion in new government spending and over $760 billion in new job-damaging tax hikes. My $10 million tax cut is just an example of the difficult cuts that have to be made on our federal budget. Furthermore, the Department of Commerce is establishing a national program office under the National Institute of Standards and Technology to begin development and implementation of the national strategy of trusted identities in cyberspace. The general goal of the strategy is to secure and protect transactions in cyberspace through use of a special ID or digital identity so that people can prove who they say they are. Let me say that cybersecurity and privacy are extremely important issues to all Americans. However, I have very strong concerns that this government-directed effort could destroy online anonymity, become the equivalent of national Internet ID, and crowd out current private sector efforts. That this project could potentially lead to issuance of unique Internet ID that would serve as a single identifier for access to password-protected website is frightening. It is equally concerning to think that if this single digital identity were to be hacked, the hacker would have access to a wide range of user personal information and accounts. Security of the cyber domain is serious, but a government-run or government-directed Internet ID system is a risk to liberty and strategy, and this strategy is not the way to go about achieving this goal. The elected representatives of Congress should address these issues, not a government bureaucracy. I will be offering a limitation amendment to block any funding towards the development of the strategy, and that is why I'm offering this amendment number 26 to cut off funding from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What person, gentleman from Virginia, rise?
Opposition to the amendment. This
gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
This account has been hit very, very hard already. Each reduction in the bill was carefully determined. The funding level provided for NIST construction in the bill is $89 million below FY 2010. NIST has played a key role in ideas with regard to strengthening infrastructure for advanced manufacturing services and sciences. NIST works with the private sector, other government agencies, and universities to develop and apply technology measurement standards needed for new and improved products. We have already reduced the funding in this count quite dramatically, and this would really, I think, hurt the jobs effort and hurt manufacturers. So I urge you, I yield to the gentleman.
Support the gentleman's position here. We've already cut this account by 50. There's 58 million in the account, a reduction of 89 million, or 60% below FY10. And the NIST does very good work. So I support the chairman and in opposition to the Lotta amendment and ask for a vote on the amendment.
I reclaim the time. And again, I mean, we want science, jobs, math, science, physics, chemistry, biology to create opportunities for manufacturing. I urge a no vote on the amendment. And yield back the balance.
Gentleman yields back his time. Does anybody else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, the questions on the amendment is offered by the gentleman from Ohio. All those in favor signify so by saying aye. Those opposed, nay.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the nays have it. Pursuant to, does the gentleman ask for a recorded vote?
I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio will be postponed. The clerk will read.
Page 201, line 9. Section 1327, the level for Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Operations, Research, and Facilities shall be $2,850,883,000. Section 1328, the level for Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Procurement, Acquisition, and Construction shall be $1,455,353,000. Section 1329, the level for Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Justice Assistance shall be $225 million. Section 1330, the level for Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, State and Local Law Enforcement Assistance shall be $953,500,000.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer amendment number 12 as a designee of Mrs. McCarthy.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 12, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Holt of New Jersey.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
I thank the chair. This amendment is to make sure that we continue the good work of the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. The NICS is a national database system that keeps track of individuals who are disqualified under current law from purchasing and possessing firearms. Need I remind my colleagues of the many reminders we have had of the need for this? The amendment before us here seeks to ensure that the Department of Justice continues funding the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007 at the current level of $20 million. It was signed into law in January 2008 and requires all states to provide the NICS with relevant records that are needed to conduct effective background checks. Additionally, the NICS Improvement Act provides grants to states and territories to update their records and transmit the records to the NICS database. NICS is a critical tool in the fight to keep firearms from those legally disqualified from purchasing and possessing them. The only way to enforce the law is to ensure that NICS has up-to-date records from state and federal sources. And we understand the constraints on the federal budget. However, by continuing to fund this program at the current FY10 level, we continue the vital effort to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. I encourage members to support this amendment. And had I had the floor before, I would have offered an amendment to restore the $310 million that was cut from the life-saving community-oriented policing, or COPS, program. But I was denied that opportunity. So I ask for support for the amendment from Mrs. McCarthy and me to fund the NICS Improvement Amendments Act. And I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Virginia.
The gentleman's going to get that because we're going to accept the amendment. And
does the gentleman seek recognition?
I do, for 5 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The Appropriations Committee will be requiring the Department of Justice to come back to the committee with a spending plan that outlines how it intends to use the funds provided under state and local law enforcement. We accept the amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
I have an amendment under Section 1332. Where are we now? We're not there.
The reading has not progressed to that point yet. The clerk will read.
Page 203, line 5, Section 1331. The level for Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Juvenile Justice Programs shall be $232,500,000. Section 1332, the level for Department of Justice, Community-Oriented Policing Services shall be $290,500,000.
What purpose does the gentlelady seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk, number 240.
Designate the amendment.
Amendment number 240, printed in the congressional record, offered by Ms. Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order against the gentlewoman's amendment.
Point of order is reserved. Gentlelady is recognized in support of her amendment for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank the ranking member and, of course, the manager of for the majority. Mr. Chairman, I rise for a very important discussion. As a member of the House Judiciary Committee and someone who truly believes that the COPS program that has been initiated over a long tenure of time has truly brought down the crime statistics across America. Whether you're a rural hamlet or whether or not you happen to be a major city, the COPS program has been an anchor for security for neighborhoods who cannot afford to pay for their own private police services. This amendment restores the $600 million that is offered to be taken from the present funding, and it restores or would prevent the taking of 1,330 cops off the street, and as well, it will provide the safety net that is necessary. If I'd had command of the floor earlier, I would have also added to this discussion the elimination of salaries that are eliminating the use of resources for the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act and the resources necessary to enforce the Voting Rights Act in the new redistricting plans that will be coming forward. But it is certainly a shame to take in the middle of municipal budget years a sizable amount of dollars of which they had been operating on and depended on. There are local communities of which the COPS program provides 1 police officer, 2 police officers, 20 police officers, 30, and that is the very existence of that community. In cities around America, cops have been laid off, and that should be an effort or a decision of last resort. When you talk about going forward, my question to my friends on the other side of the aisle is the purpose of this legislative initiative job creation or job elimination? How can you do such damage to the municipal workforce that are on the front lines of serving local communities? The COPS program has been an enormous success. It has survived several administrations, Republican and Democrat. And to suggest that the COPS program would be obliterated or at least devastated in such an amount would, from my perspective, be the wrong direction to go. COPS academy classes have been put on hold. Mayors have eliminated classes. I've seen that in cities around America. And as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, we have had several encounters of eliminating COPS funding. This amendment simply strikes the elimination or the intent to eliminate a certain amount of funding for the COPS program. I'd ask my colleagues to ask themselves the question, do the American people deserve safety and security in a time where, as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, we continue to face international and homeland security threats here in the United States? The domestic law enforcement is a key element of providing that kind of safety net. Training, the opportunity for security, and the opportunity for ensuring that hamlets, towns, cities, and rural communities, counties, do not have to suffer through the crisis of the lack of security. So I'd ask my colleagues to consider a waiver so that we could address this question of the funding of a very important program. And I might add that I look forward to working with the Senate to restore those salaries to the Department of Justice so that we do not have to undermine the enforcement of an enormously important legislative initiative, one that Martin Luther King and John Lewis, our colleague, fought hard for, and one that has withstood the test of time, and that is the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. How could we? And I look forward to working with the Senate for allowing that to go forward, as well as to be able to enforce the values or the laws, the requirements of the Voting Rights Act as relates to the 2011 redistricting that will take place in the coming months. With that, I reserve my time. I yield back.
You can't reserve time. Does she yield back? Gentlelady yield back the balance of her time.
You're sure we don't take the vote?
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman.
Does the gentlelady yield back the balance of her time?
I yield back
The gentlelady can't
time.
reserve time.
Pardon me?
The gentlelady cannot reserve time.
I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek
I
recognition?
rise to raise a point of order. The chairman's amendment, Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposed a net increase in budget authority. And before I comment on it, one, this does not cut the Voting Rights Act. So that's not accurate. This does not cut the Voting Rights Act. Secondly,
the gentleman may state his point of order, but
well, but I think it's important to make sure.
On the issue.
The amendment is not in order under Section 3J3 of House Resolution 5 of the 112th Congress, which states, "It shall not be in order to consider an amendment to a general appropriation bill proposing a net increase in budget authority in the bill unless considered in block with another amendment or amendments proposing an equal or greater decrease in budget authority pursuant to Clause 2F of Rule 21. The amendment proposed a net increase in budget authority in the bill in violation of such section, and I ask for a ruling from the chair."
Does any other member wish to address the point of order? Gentlelady from Texas.
Chairman, thank you. I do. And as I indicated before, first of all, the gentleman was mishearing what I said. I indicated that I had an earlier amendment that I decided not to offer because I intend to work with the other body on it, but it would have diminished the ability to enforce the Voting Rights Act. That is not what we're speaking of today.
Needs to address the point of order.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and so I wanted to clarify that I was not speaking on this amendment. And this amendment, I've simply asked for a waiver. Frankly, this is too important an issue to be addressed by the gentleman's point of order. I asked for a waiver. This is a denying, if you will, of huge amounts of monies to many municipalities all across this nation. $600 million is absolutely ludicrous. It causes a loss of jobs and a loss of safety for the United States. I ask for a waiver on the point of order. I yield back.
The chair is prepared to rule on the point of order. From New York.
Sure. The intention of the rule that the chairman is referring to is to make sure we're not adding any additional spending. But in fact, by cutting the COPS program, you're actually adding an enormous amount of expenditure in the long run. And what the gentlelady is going to be doing by preserving cops on the street, you have less crime, lower insurance rates, less costs for prevention. You wind up, cops on the beat wind up saving money, and they save money in another way. They save money because localities don't need to raise taxes to keep these cops on the street. So I think the gentlelady's amendment is a net budget reducer, a net budget saver. Sometimes we invest in things here that save money, and the gentlelady's amendment does that, so it's in compliance with the rule.
The chair is prepared to rule on the point of order. Does anybody else wish to be heard on it? If not, the gentleman from Virginia makes a point of order that the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas violates Section 3J3 of House Resolution 5. Section 3J3 establishes a point of order against an amendment proposing a net increase in budget authority in the pending bill. The chair has been persuasively guided by an estimate from the chair of the Committee on the Budget that the amendment proposes a net increase in budget authority in the bill. Therefore, the point of order is sustained, and the amendment is not in order. Are there other amendments? Not the clerk. Gentleman from New York seek recognition.
Not at this time. I'm in Section 1332.
Section 1332 is the pending section.
An amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 125, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Wiener of New York.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I proceed, I make a unanimous consent request. There's a typographical error that says, should say $298 million, and it has only 5 zeros. So in the two places that is stated, I ask unanimous consent to just add the extra zero so it makes sense.
We have no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Objection, seeing none, so ordered. And the amendment is so modified.
This is to restore the COPS program and take money out of space. But before I do that, and I don't need two of these, just one is fine. Before I do that, I really have to say I don't think this process is on the level. Right? What are we doing here? We're figuring out which diminished amount we're going to take from to restore another diminished amount. This bill isn't going to become law. The President today said that he's going to veto this bill, as he should. It slashes funding on so many important things to our communities. I bet you most of the authors of the bill are praying that he vetoes this bill. But the fact is we're kind of in here playing this game. We're trying to take from one slashed account and move funds to another slashed account. But in the clear case of how the Republicans are swinging a meat axe rather than a scalpel, the COPS program, police officers, cops on the beat, you know, the COPS program has been a success, not just because it's been a big city program. Look at this. You've got cops over the first 10 years of the program in every single state, every single community has had increase because of police officers. And I thought being tough on crime was a Republican ideal. You know, you slash this funding, and what's going to wind up happening is your localities are going to have one of two choices: lay off police officers or raise taxes some other way. It's going to be a net zero effect because they're going to want to keep these cops on the beat. So where do we take the money from to replace just the hiring component? We're not going to replace the whole program, just the hiring component. We're going to take it out of space exploration. I want to go see the Mars too, but I'd much rather have cops on the streets of Brooklyn and Queens. I want it for all of your districts as well. But let's face a little something about this budget. This is an irresponsible budget you put on the floor. And I'm sure Mr. Dix would agree. It's irresponsible to slash air traffic controllers 20%. Who thinks that's a good idea? It's irresponsible to cut 1,500 cops on the street. Who thinks that's a great idea? It's irresponsible to say to middle-class parents who are getting Pell Grants, sorry, your kid can't go to college next year. Who thinks that's a good idea? The President has said that he's going to veto this bill. Why don't we stop right now, roll it up, fold it up, go back and try to get this right. Let's try to come up with a common-sense budget. We know there are going to be cuts that are going to be necessary. But to the COPS program, I mean, we've got to understand here that these are going to require some tough choices. And I had a joking exchange with Mr. Dix earlier. I think we can get more from defense, we can get more from agriculture. I get it. But frankly speaking, I believe that there are some values that should transcend politics and transcend communities, and one of them is how many police officers. And not only are there a lot of cops going to these communities, let's look at what's happening. In Jackson, Mississippi, 347 cops, they had a 12% reduction in crime. Detroit, Michigan, 500 cops, a 7% reduction in crime. Boston, Massachusetts, almost a 29% reduction in crime. This is a good law enforcement program. And so I would say on behalf of all of my colleagues, and Congressman Grimm is supportive of this, Congressman DeFazio I think is here, Congressman Cohen is here, Congressman Pallone I know is interested in this, and we know Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congressman Reichert on your side is interested. I can tell you this, if we asked every person to stand up who had cops hired in their districts, every one of you would have to stand up. It's going to all 435 districts. So let's keep that program going. Now, do I like the idea we have to take it from NASA space exploration? Look, I don't know any of the crime statistics on Mars, and I'm interested, but it's a bad choice. And if any of you like space exploration, so do I. And in a way, I'm playing the game, too. I'm taking from one place to give to another. But I do believe that it's the interest of all of us to try to set these priorities straight. And one of the things we can do is vote yes on the Wiener Amendment and then do something else. It's late. We've gone through this exercise for a while. Since it's really a kabuki dance, and we know that this document isn't going to become law, the President has already said he's going to veto it. We already know the American people are not going to sit back for a 20% reduction in air traffic controllers. How is it a Republican ideal to make the air traffic less safe? How is that a value that somehow drove this Congress? That shouldn't be, nor should it be reducing the number of police officers on the street. That's not who we are as a country. It's not who we should be as a Congress. So I hope you support the Wiener Amendment by taking from Mars and putting in the streets of your district. And then I think it's late. Let's fold up the rest of the bill. Let's go back. Let's have some bipartisan discussion, try to figure out the way to do this in a way that the President won't veto. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Virginia.